Hey guys, it's Dowden. In this video, I'm gonna show you how to make music like Serge Devant. Serge Devant's style is a mix of deep tech and deep house, sometimes a little bit more techy, but always full of groove and full of percussion. Serge Devant's style is full of really deep and gritty bass lines, and they sound like this. His percussion and drum loops are extremely groovy and full of instruments, and they sound something like this. As bass and percussion heavy as the tracks are, we still have room for some really nice deep pads and a little bit of vocals as well. So we're gonna get started, but before we do, if you're new to the channel or you haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button with notifications on. And if you'd like to get access to this project file, the samples, the presets, everything included, you can click the link in the description below for access to the project file download. In this style of deep house and deep tech, a lot of the times the kicks are a little bit shorter and more to the point, meaning sub isn't as sustained as maybe some other genres. I'm going to just use a pretty quick kick, and this kick is G sharp, so the track is in G sharp, and this kick is in my Kickstarter sample pack number 1. If you want access to that sample pack, you can click on the link that also brings you to the project files, and you can download that as well. So I'm going to draw in just 4 quarter notes. And we can take a listen to the kick. So the kick is nice and clean, but I want to add just a little bit more sub to that, that kick drum. So I'm going to boost that low end right at the G sharp. I want to make sure that I'm boosting the actual key of the track and the key of the sub and the kick. I don't want it to be too obvious, but just boosting it, gentle boost. You can see that the kick, the sub is pretty quick. We're at, 200 milliseconds is the sample. Pull that out a little bit more. And you can see that the sub is only there for a short amount of time. So boosting it like this, just giving it that extra little few dB of weight there is going to help that sub punch through just a little bit more. Then I'm going to add a drum bus. And I want to bring this down the dry wet because usually drum bus is pretty aggressive. So I'm going to bring my drive down. Transients I'll push up a little bit. Decay I'll bring down, and then I'll push the boom up. I'll put this to G sharp. And again, just reducing that decay to make that sub not so sustained, and then bring the dry wet down quite a bit. Drive down a little bit more. Just a touch of the drum bus to give it a bit more weight behind that. And that's it for the kick drum. Really, really simple. Actually, you know what? I'll throw a compressor on there as well, just to really make sure we're not getting any scraggly peaks. And right away, I can see that even without any threshold being pulled down, I am compressing. So I want to put that attack right down to 0. Maybe I'll bring this gain down a dB or 2. And then I'll bring this threshold down a little bit. Just grabbing the very, very top of that sound, the very, very tiny peaks that are coming through. Serge Devant's bass lines are usually pretty groovy and bouncy, but not over the top into the more fun and, upbeat vibe. It's more of a deeper, darker kind of fun vibe, which usually means that the notes are kind of bouncing in between each other, but they're not that happy sounding. So let's make another MIDI track here. Just gonna grab a wavetable, keep it simple. Drag and drop that in. And I want the bass to be almost entire clean, just pretty pure sine wave with just a little bit of harmonics. I want to hear the sub bass over speakers that don't necessarily have a sub, but I want to leave a lot of room for the secondary bass line that I'm going to be putting in, which is also going to complement the groove very much. Okay, so I'm just going to draw it out, and we're using just a sine wave one here. Let's push up just a tiny bit so we get a little bit of harmonic content, just a very, very tiny amount. Let's go into here. I'm in G sharp. Let's go to the G sharp. And let's go all the way to the end here. I'm just going to do right after the kick. And I'm just going to let the kick hit, and then right away the bass line's going to come in. And duplicate that over. Maybe I'll move this second one over a little bit. And I'm just getting this nice groove going. So the kick is going to hit, and then right after the kick hits, we're pretty much just making room for that first kick to hit. This bass is going to come in right after. So it's going to sound like one long sustained bass, and then we're going to have a bit of a jump into the second note, and then the third and fourth will be kind of the same long note. So let's take a listen. Okay, but I'm going to take that third note and push it up an octave and maybe make it a little bit shorter. And maybe we'll bring this one over. Cool. Now, it's bouncy, but it's not overly happy sound. It's a little bit high, so I'm going to bring this down a whole octave. And we can look at the EQ, and you can see there's not that many harmonics coming through. It's just a little bit easier to hear. If I take out the entire sub, we'll still be able to hear just a little bit. It's hard to hear, but those are the frequencies that you're going to hear on maybe laptop speakers or phone speakers, where you definitely won't be hearing the sub. Okay, so super simple. We have the bass line. I'm going to just throw a really heavy compressor on that bass line because it is jumping a little, especially when it's jumping in frequency. We can get a little bit of a jump in volume. Slower attacks, we get a bit of a punch. Let's do about 2.5. There we go. Okay, great. So I'm going to start focusing on the drums. And the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to go through hat, the open hat, and the clap, but then I'm also going to work on the percussive elements, and I'm going to go through every element of that percussion and write as I go along. With this style of deep tech, especially with Serge Devant, we're getting a lot of little nuances, a lot of little hits and things that are making the track so interesting and complex and remaining very, very groovy. So I'm going to go through those, add a bunch of effects, and we're going to spend most of our time of this video on the drums. First, I'm going to draw my hat, super, super simple. Just grab this nice, clean, crispy hi-hat. I'm going to turn the gain up a little bit. It's a little bit louder. It's a little bit white noisy, it's punchy, it's crispy. It's a nice hat for this style. So of course, just 16th notes, go in, and of course, you know how we always do, move these over just slightly, getting them just slightly different, and maybe change the velocity by a number or two. Really, really subtle. To make this even more groovy though, I'm going to add the second note here, and I'm going to turn that right down. And let's take a listen to that. We can add another one here and make it even quieter, and really, really quiet. That second accented hat is going to make it a little bit more swingy, a little bit more groovy, and it's used a lot in techier genres, so it just gives it a little bit more bounce and groove. Okay, we can throw an EQ on there. Just make sure we're taking out some of that low end. With this style of deeper tech, I actually will EQ a little bit less of the high end out because I know that the hat is so prominent and important in the track that I would actually usually EQ out a little bit more with my filter here, but I'm going to just leave a little bit more of that punchiness in that low end. Just a little bit. This area right here. So I'm going to move on to the open hat. I'm just going to try a MIDI clip. Same thing, 16th notes. And with this one, I'm going to make it much wider. I'm going to put a has effect on it, which is just a stereo delay. We have a delay plugin. We took the left and right signal and just put them between 7 and 40 milliseconds apart. Let's take a listen to that. So if you're listening on headphones or decent speakers, you're really going to hear this width. And I'm going to filter out just a little bit. So we're getting only a little bit more of the high end, only going from left to right. And if you wanted to turn down the dry wet, we get more of a spread sound that's a little bit less from left to right, and only about 23% is going from left to right. So we're still getting that width, but we're getting a little bit more of the center signal as well. But this does sometimes cause phase cancellation. So I'm going to check in mono to make sure that it's not causing any issues. To me, it sounds really good. It sounds like it's not getting much phase cancellation, if any at all. So I'm going to leave it on there at 24%. I'm going to add some shakers before we dive into the rest of the percussion and the clap. So shakers, very, very simply, just going to draw in the 16th notes, maybe skew them a little bit. Duplicate that over, and we have our 16ths. And I'm going to change the velocity so that it's hitting much quieter. Let's just copy that over like that. I'm also going to grab that same effect that I put on here and throw that on the shakers. I'm going to put 100% dry wet. Now we have this really subtle shaker in the background, and now we can move on to the clap. So with claps in this style of deep tech, deep house, a lot of the time they're very complementary to the kick drum. They're very tight sounding, they're sometimes really short, and they just really accent the kick and make the kick sound really clean and nice. I'll show you what I mean by this. So I'm gonna draw in, I have two claps here. So they're both pretty short, pretty punchy, not too aggressive. But I also have this much lower kind of a hit sound. They're a little bit still too much for what I'm trying to do. They're a little bit too aggressive. So I'm going to go in with an EQ, and I'm going to take out a little bit of that low end. And I'm going to go into the second one and take out a little bit of that high end. And a good tip is actually to, if it's too much high end, we can just actually transpose it down a few notes. Take out the low end as well. And take out some of that high end bite. Next, I'm going to add one more has effect, that stereo delay on the higher one here. So sometimes what the producers will actually do is throw a little bit of filtering on the high end as well to make it not so snappy and high end, more again, complementing that kick. Great. Okay, so let's take a listen to everything that we've done so far. The kick, the bass, and the drums up until the clap. Again, I want to throw another EQ on that open hat, and I'm going to leave more of that low end. And it sounds pretty good so far. Let's move on to the percussive elements. So I'm going to move into some of the percussion elements, and this is where things start to get really, really interesting. Before I dive into the individual percussive elements, I wanted to show you this loop that I made. A lot of Serge Devant and deep tech tracks have a bit of a subtle layer in the background. Sometimes it's just background ambient, sometimes it's field recordings, and then a lot of the time they are these percussive loops. And I find that adding a quiet background percussive loop like this one just really fills out the entire track, and it fills up the spectrum quite a bit. So it makes it feel fuller, it makes it feel more interesting and a lot groovier and more professional. So let's take a listen to the loop first, and then in the context of the track with and without the loop. So I've actually added some EQ as well to this percussion loop. This is what it sounded like before. So I've just kind of made room for that clap to come through, and just taking out some of the crunchier bits and taking out the low end that I didn't need. So let's go into the percussive loop. I've chosen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different percussive elements. With Serge Devant's tracks, there are so many percussive elements going on. Sometimes there's just a percussion that hits once or twice in a 16-bar loop. Sometimes there's percussion that repeats over and over, and we're just using effects to make it wider and more interesting and different. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to make an 8-beat loop, and I'm just going to add these percussive elements as I go and try to make them really groovy. So the main thing to remember is by adding in new percussive elements, each one has to complement the loop. It's really important. You don't want to just be raw dog and throwing things in for no reason. You want every instrument that you put in, every percussive hit has to have its own reason for being there. It has to add value to the loop. Otherwise, you're going to start to pull away the groove of the track and be a little bit more distracting. So let's duplicate all these sounds over so I get a little bit more of my loop. I'm going to turn off this percussion fill loop for now, and I'm going to turn off the kick and just take out the low end of the master. I don't need that low end of the kick, the sub. I'm just going to listen to the track without that. And then I'm going to start building my percussion. Okay, so I have all my instruments here. Let's take a listen to each individual one. I have a rim shot. It's like bongo type sound. A clicky thing. Kind of like a splat-y type snare sound. Another rim shot type sound. Nice clean bongo. A clap. And then the reverse clap. And then that same clap just reversed. So I have just an array of sounds, a bunch of different things. I'm looking for ones that are a bit shorter. They're more hit sounds. They're percussive. They don't. Most of them don't hold too much tonal weight, meaning they don't carry too much of a pitch, but some of them do. And I'll get to that when I run down to those instruments. So this one is pretty long. It almost sounds like a clap. It's got some tail end to it. Let's just listen to the loop. Okay, so I'm going to try and add this in a spot that adds to the groove. So that sounded good. It's making me want to bounce my head more. It's making me want to bop more. So do the same thing on the next one. Nope, too much. Let's go to this one. Nice. Already sounds groovier. I'm happy with that. It's a pretty long sustained sound. Might be a little bit too much if I bring in too many of these. So let's go. This sound here. This one is a little bit tonal. It has some pitch to it. So I want to make sure that I'm choosing sounds that are within the same key, if not the same root note, which is the G sharp of the track. I know that it's going to be in G sharp, so I want to check that sound. I'm going to draw in some MIDI, and then I'll check the key after. And what I'm going to try and do is actually give it its own rhythmic loop. So I'm going to not just do one single note and see how it goes. I'm going to try and make like a bit of a rhythm with it. Let's go one more here. Cool, that sounds good. And then I'm going to duplicate that over. So I'm leaving room for other instruments. I'm leaving room here, leaving room on the other side. I think right here would be cool to add another little swingy hit. Maybe this sound? Sure, let's try that right there. Maybe over here. So it kind of rolls into it. Tap, 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 tap. Cool, I like that. And then duplicate that over. Oh, that one's wrong. Let's go here. Maybe I can even put another one here and kind of surround it. Cool, like the way that sounds. Let's keep going here. This nice little hit. That's on. on the same note as the hat. It's kind of hard to hear it, but don't be afraid to layer sounds as well. Just because I have some empty space here doesn't mean I can't throw this behind something else, but it's not that prominent of a sound, so I'm not going to layer it with the hat. I'm not really going to hear it. Maybe I'll layer it, but I'll just move another one here. Nice. And I'll do the same thing over on the other side. But maybe let's move this one over, make it a little bit different. Nice. That sounds pretty good. Let's move all the way over to these claps here. I want to put one right on the kick and hear how it sounds. Maybe. That sounds pretty good, actually. I want to do like a little bit of a different one. So the first one is going to be tap, tap, and the next one's going to be 3. So tap, tap, tap. Nice. Sounds pretty good. And then I have this backwards clap. So maybe we can put that before this thing starts out again. So it'll be... Oh, that one was off. The trick with backwards claps is sometimes they don't line up properly because they're reversed. It's kind of hard to know when it is. Oh, there it is. Nice, like that sounds cool. We have 2 more sounds. So this rim shot, I'm gonna try and layer it with some stuff. And keeping in mind, the faster I repeat these drums, the more energy the track will probably sound like it has. If I put this pretty quick, we're gonna kind of increase the momentum of the track a little bit. And it's gonna be more of a statement piece. But I kind of like it, so I'm gonna duplicate that over. And I might fine tune this after. We'll see how it sounds with the rest of the track. Did I do that right? Nope, needs to move over one. That was an accident, but it sounds pretty good. That should have been moved over here, but I kind of like how it sounds like that. Kind of slows it down. It kind of pulls the energy back a little bit, but we'll see how it works with the rest of the track. And the last sound is this bongo. The bongo is going to have a lot of tonal weight to it. It's going to be pretty obvious that it has that tone. So I want it to be nice and loud and well, not too loud, but see how much stuff is layering now, and it doesn't sound bad. It sounds good. We have a lot of notes hitting, and the velocity is all the same as well. So I'm going to grab a velocity tool, and I'm going to throw that bad boy on the entire perc loop, and I'm going to throw the random up quite a bit. And let's take a listen now. So there's a lot going on, and it sounds honestly pretty good in my opinion if I don't toot my own horn too much. But I want to go in and add some effects to all these to give them their own place. We'll start with this clap. I'm going to use a lot of stereo width, panning, maybe some other effects. Let's try and get through this pretty quick though. I'm going to take this reverse clap, and I'm going to pan it using the Haas effect. So with this Haas effect, I'm going to go from left to right, and it's going to be like a stereo. So it's going to go back and forth between your ears. No, just listen how it sounds. Nice, that sounds good. And it's just going to give it that nice, from left to right or right to left speaker sound. And it's going to sound like it's kind of surrounding your head. It goes from left to right first. So I'm going to keep this clap panned a little bit to the right. So it kind of feels like it's reversing into that clap. Let's go to this bongo. And earlier I mentioned that I want to make sure that these are in the right key. So I'm going to, you can use a tuner, but sometimes it doesn't work. I'm going to just throw an EQ on the entire track here. So you can see I have a tuner here. Let's see if it works with that sound. I'm just going to solo it. Yeah, so it doesn't work in the tuner. So I'm just going to move that over here and use it if I can otherwise. But now I'm going to look for the most prominent frequency in this EQ. It's right around here. Looking at G sharp. There's some other peaks here, but the main one is the G sharp. So I'm going to cut out that low end. And I'm going to boost that G sharp just slightly, just so I can really grab onto those main frequencies. Perfect. Let's move on to the next sound. When I left these in, I must have transposed it. So before it actually wasn't the G sharp. It was much higher. That's what it sounded like before. So we were hitting all the way up at D sharp. And I wanted it to be on the G. I wanted it to be the root note. So I moved it down the 7 semitones. And I did the same thing with this sound here. So I moved it down moved it up 3 semitones to get the right tuning. Let's take a listen to it. And I just realized I put this EQ on the whole channel. No, I just want that on that bongo sample. I didn't mean to put it on the whole chain. I'm gonna go back, drop that on that bongo. There we go. And go back to the conga, check the EQ on that one. We have a really low frequency here. I'm going to get rid of that. And G sharp is there. So I'm going to cut all the way till that G sharp. And I'm going to push it up. Sounding pretty good. Let's pan this one a little bit to the left. I like the way that sounds. Keep moving on. This sound definitely has some low end to it. It's really subtle, but I'm going to take that out. Let's throw an erosion on there just to make things interesting. That's pretty cool. I'm going to throw an LFO onto that as well, and we're going to move around that erosion. So I'm going to map this LFO to the frequency. It's not totally different, but it's just going to give it a bit of a dynamic sound. It's going to move it back and forth a little bit. And last but not least, I'll put an auto pan on there. So we're just kind of going back and forth. Maybe a very, very fast delay. Very, very fast, only repeating once or twice. A low amount of feedback is what I mean. It sounds like it's pretty snappy, so I'm going to put a limiter on here and just really make sure I'm grabbing that first little snap. And throw that onto the actual chain. Okay, we're making progress. We're almost done our percussion here. I want this rim shot to be a little bit wider, so I'm going to grab an EQ and throw it on the channel. And I'm going to boost the side information a little bit. I can hear that it's already pretty wide, but I'm going to boost it even more using mid-side EQ. If I don't want that low sub, I'm going to take that out for sure. I'm going to boost those side frequencies. And definitely take it out of the sides of the speakers. Side of the signal. Great. Last, we have this rim shot. And I'm going to leave the low end in this one. It's just going to give a little bit of a percussive feel, the low end. Maybe take the sub out though, just leaving everything around here. And I'll keep that one centered. Let's pan this one a little bit to the right. This one a little bit to the left. And we'll leave this one as is. Put that auto pan on it. Cool, let's take a listen to the percussion loop with everything now. I'm going to go in and do a little bit of the volume changing now. So we want the clap probably pretty high. And maybe I'm going to cut out a little bit of the high end of this clap with some EQ. Actually, I'm going to do this with a few of the instruments. Maybe just take out the high end, make it feel a little bit further in the background. And cut out that low end. Okay, let's do that with. The bongo's a little bit loud, or this rim is a little bit loud. I'm gonna turn it down just a little bit. Turn this up a little bit. Turn this up a little bit. That's good. This one up a little bit. And the clap down a little bit. The last thing I'm going to do is add a reverb onto this channel and just send everything individually to that reverb. I'm going to turn my return track on. I'm going to grab the reverb and throw it into this channel. So now this drum rack has its own reverb. I'm going to open up that reverb, do 100% dry wet. The decay time I'm going to keep around 900, 800 milliseconds. And I'm going to send each channel individually to that reverb. Let's push, turn the sends on now so we can see the sends. And put more of this reverse clap. Just a little bit of reverb on here. Not much. A bit less. Put a lot on this one. Sounds that I want a little bit more of a tail, a little bit more wider sounding. I want more reverb. Sounds are a bit more percussive and low end. I want less reverb on. And the last thing I'm going to do is grab a glue compressor and throw it on the entire drum bus. Let me turn those percussion down just a little bit. So I'm going to reduce, so I'm just getting a couple dB of gain reduction. I'm going to leave the attack and release settings and the ratio all stock. And turn up the makeup gain about 2 or 3 dB. One more thing I could try is a saturator to see if I can put a little bit of saturation on the drums, just 1 or 2 dB to make it a bit more full and crispy. So I'm going to start focusing on the synths. In a lot of Serge Devant's tracks, he uses FM synthesis to make these really, really big sounding bass plucks. And that's what I've done in this track. Start with the MIDI first. I'm going to go down to G sharp 2, and draw out some 8th notes. A bit more of a sustain note. And let's shorten these up a little bit. So this preset has a bit of modulation. It's moving around on its own. It's going to make it more interesting and exciting. And it sounds really cool. So just put these notes. Again, so I'm not actually copying the bass line note for note. I'm staying at the same root note, but I'm kind of making my own rhythm on top of the bass line. So I have the bass line, it's groovy, but I'm adding this second groovy bass line that's going to be on top. That's not interfering with the first bass line, but it's complementing it. So you don't always have to stay within the exact same notes as the bass line. You can create your own secondary bass line to kind of go along with it. And it's something that I do quite often in my music. There's one. I'm just going to duplicate that over. Take a listen with the bass line. Cool. So it sounds pretty good, but I'm going to make my own FM synth as well to show you guys how to make something like this. So I'm going to go into MIDI, I'm going to grab an operator, which is an FM synth. And all I'm going to do is turn up this second operator. That's what these are called, operators. So I'm going to push this up. And first I'll drag the MIDI over top so we can hear how it sounds. I'm going to bring this down from 1 to 0.5. So we get a lower note. You can see here on the EQ. And I'm going to bring this up in volume. Starting to get like more harmonically rich content. And then I'm going to change this so that it's more of a pluck. Bit of release on there, bit of release on the original sound. Don't need the filter, so I'll just turn that off. I turn the tone down a little bit, and let's push the volume of it up. Let's turn my master EQ off here, and let's listen to the sound. Cut out that low end. And the more I bring up this second level here, I'm getting more and more of an FM style synth. More of a metallic resonant sound. So that sounds pretty good. But bring this down just a little bit more. I'm just going to change this last note here. Put a little bit more release on there. I'm going to duplicate this, and then I'm going to freeze and flatten this. Now I have this. I'm going to grab both and actually bring them down a full octave here. So now you're getting that much more deep, dark bass style that a lot of Serge Devant tracks has. I'm going to go in and actually boost up that high end of that and cut out the low because I don't want it to be so sub heavy because I have my bass line already. And boost that high end quite a bit. Maybe we can get like a really strong resonant frequency here on the G sharp. And grab another one too, maybe. Let's go G sharp here, 400-ish. There it is. Oh, that's the wrong one. There we go. Pushing up those G sharps, we're getting more of a formant sound. And then I'm going to add some reverb. And I don't want any of this sound, this reverb, below a certain point to be in stereo because we could run into phase cancellation. So I'm going to go into a mid-side EQ and remove anything from the side past around 200. Push that up a little bit. Mid is fine. We take that low end out a bit more. So now I know that I won't have any of the side information interfering when I down mix to mono. And let's put a low cut on here just to be safe. Now I have this FM bass. I have this original bass, but I'm going to keep that one there. And then I'm going to actually just get rid of this one. I'm not going to keep it on. I'll turn that off. And then I have this one. I'm going to make an accent with it. And I'm going to remove everything but that one pluck there. So get rid of this, and get rid of this. It sounds like this. And maybe I'll push this up an octave. And in case anyone wondering why I didn't just grab this and drop it down an octave, it actually will sound a little bit different. Using algorithms that are used to drop the pitch will sound a little bit different than using the actual sound. So if I show you the difference between lowering it 1 octave and this one, even if I take out the EQ and the reverb, it does sound a little bit different. And personally, I think it sounds a little bit more gritty when I've exported it and then dropped the pitch. Something I do quite often actually is instead of just dropping the pitch in the actual sound, I'll export it, like I'll freeze it, and then I'll drop it or I'll raise it, and it'll just give it a bit of its own color. So now I have this accent sound. I'm going to drag that up 1 more octave. Maybe 1 more. And I'm going to put some reverb on it as well. And let's take a listen to everything. So let's get rid of this one here. So I have this one still, it's turned off, volume's off. I'll leave that in the project file so you can play around with it, but let's take a listen to what we have now. Turn this down in volume a little bit. Okay, and I'll duplicate that over. And we're going to move on to the 2 final instruments. One is going to be a pad and one is going to be a vocal. So the pad I've chosen is this Pigments one. A lot of Serge Devant's tracks has a bit of a pretty low sounding, really harmonically rich string or pad instrument. So I grabbed this one called Atlantis, and I'm just going to draw in just a G sharp in the pretty low octave and see how it sounds. I think it sounds pretty good. I'm actually just going to freeze and flatten this one so that it's not restarting every single time I play it. It's just a preset that I grabbed, Atlantis. If you don't have Pigments, I will include the flattened file in the Ableton project file. So, okay, so I'll get rid of this. I can consolidate this. If you don't have Pigments, I will include a bounced out version of this audio in the project file. Last but not least, I'm going to go on to my vocal that I put in. So a lot of Serge's tracks has this like hooky type of vocal. It's really catchy. It's moving the track along. And what I did is just recorded myself. Yeah. Hi. So all I did was record myself saying, I don't even think I said I am. I think I just said, yeah. And it sounded like I am. If you can, just record yourself saying something, anything, and, you know, put it on a beat or a rhythm. And then I just grabbed a filter delay and I threw it on there. And just, obviously this doesn't sound great on its own. I am. Right? I recorded multiple, so they're all a little bit different. And then I slammed on this filter delay and it just magic. Being the different lengths and different ways that I'm saying it, it's adding a whole new dimension, especially with this filter delay. I'm gonna throw an EQ on there just to make sure. And of course, I'll throw a little bit of reverb. And let's take a listen to the entire track with that vocal looped, and then we'll do a very, very quick arrangement of just a few bars and then introducing that pad. Just turning that vocal up. Turn that accent down a little bit. Turn that bass up a little bit as well. You know what? I'm actually going to throw a saturator on this bass. Oh, and I also need to turn the effects back on. And yeah, I'm going to throw a saturator on here. Just give it a bit more drive and grit. Before, after. I am pushing this up quite a bit. Maybe I'm going to turn this down a little bit so we're not clipping so much. It's go ahead and draw out a few bars of this, and then I'll bring the pad in maybe somewhere over here. So I'll duplicate all this over, and then I'll duplicate all this over. Turn the loop off and grab everything and duplicate it over this 30-second mark. And I'll also bring in the open hat there. So maybe we won't have the open hat come in right away. We'll have it come in at this spot here. And let's bring in the bass just a little bit later as well. Let me bring this over. Duplicate everything over one more time. And we will, there we go. I'm just gonna make this one long note on the pad. Vocal's good. Maybe I'll filter in the vocal a little bit actually, using EQ. Okay, bring that filter up there. And for the FM bass, maybe I'll just actually filter out the low end. See how that sounds. And let's take out that accent for now. And let's turn on that accent a little bit. So I'm gonna take the bass out at the beginning. I'm just gonna do like a really quick version of this, a condensed version. So we'll have just the kick playing without any of the bass, and the bass coming in, then the accent coming in with the hi-hat. And then after that, I'll bring in the bass line and with the rest of the track. And then we'll have that pad coming in as the vocal is building up as well. So it's gonna be like a very condensed, shortened version of what the track could kind of build into. So at the 30-second mark, we'll bring in the bass, move this pad over a little bit. Maybe we'll make like the pad into sort of like a breakdown thing here. Duplicate this over, duplicate this all over. Yeah, we'll do like a nice little breakdown. Just copy, duplicate it over, and bring this back here. So we have that open hat, the drop. So we're at about 1:30 here, and we have a nice little breakdown with these strings. Maybe I'll make a little bit of a build, put a vocoder on that pad, and dry wet down. And as the track is building back up into that drop, I'm just going to put a little bit of dry wet on this. It sounds like this. And reverb. Lots of reverb on there. And then I will turn the volume down using a utility. Right here. Can move these accent hits over a little bit. They will come in at this mark. Okay, let's take a listen. How to make music like Serge Devant. right, everybody, thanks so much for watching. I hope you learned something and I hope you enjoyed. If you're new to the channel or you haven't already yet subscribed, please go ahead and click that subscribe button so you get more videos like this one. And if you want to download the project files, click the link in the description below or click on the download button right here.